Hey everybody, I'm psyched you guys are back. Tekken's a very, very hard game, so congrats on making it this far. Now let's jump into the 6th and final episode of my Tekken Academy. Now over the first 5 weeks, we covered your options, gameplay, and strategies. For this final week, we're going to talk a little bit more about your opponents. Knowing your opponents is half the battle, and you're going to be encountering all types of different playstyles as you go along. The number of things that you can learn about an opponent are endless. From the very beginning of a match, you should start trying to learn as much about your opponent as you can. Now that you've learned about different attacks, ranges, movements, and strategies, it's time to use that information to your advantage. Now figuring out opponents is super satisfying and one of the main reasons why I play Tekken. With so many opponents to challenge, the game never feels repetitive and I can always find new things to learn. But let's start with some general observations you can make about an opponent's playstyle. And these are going to be things that you can pick up over the course of several games against any player. You can start learning from the very beginning of the first round. Try to figure out if your opponent prefers to go in and attack as much as possible, or if they rather sit back and let you make the first move. Knowing whether you're dealing with an aggressive or defensive opponent helps you plan accordingly. The next thing you'll want to notice are the attacks that your opponent prefers. All players have moves that they really like to use often. If you notice the same attacks being used in the same round or throughout multiple rounds, that's what you're going to want to remember for later. Now that you've picked up some information on an opponent's offense, it's time to pay attention to their defense. Watch how the enemy reacts at close range. Are they eager to attack? And last, are they using standing guard or crouching guard? Now we can use these general observations to learn a lot about our opponent. Try to find out anything that you might be able to take advantage of, such as bad habits, attack patterns, or defensive tendencies. And that's called adapting. Adapting is the second step to figuring out and defeating an enemy. Once you know what your opponent is likely to do, you can start working on ways to counter it. We can use the examples that we just mentioned. The first thing we observed was whether your opponent was aggressive or defensive. If you know they prefer to be the aggressor, try using the keep out attacks we discussed in episode 4. Use them anytime you anticipate the opponent trying to come in for an attack. The second observation was to remember your opponent's most frequent attacks. Having this information helps improve your decisions on defense. If any of those attacks are unsafe, you should be punishing your opponents. If you are having a hard time punishing strings, remember what the attack combination looks like and take it to practice mode. Never forget that you can always jump into practice mode to figure out punishes. It's vital to punish as many attacks as you can. This keeps the opponent honest and forces them to play more carefully. And as you improve, mastering punishes become a fundamental part of your game, just like performing combos. It's important to find ways to counter your opponent's defense as well, which is why I recommended you pay attention to the way your opponents guard at close range. Up close, you can go for low and mid attacks to break down your opponent. You might notice that your opponent isn't guarding low at all. In that case, adapt and use your lows more frequently. Or they could be the exact opposite, crouch guarding a little too much. And in that case, just use your mid attacks. The sooner you figure this out, the sooner you can adapt and outplay your opponent. So, those are basic ways to observe the opponent's game and adapt accordingly. You can take it one step further and apply what we learned last week about different situations to discover even more specific info on your opponents. For example, advanced players can use other factors such as life remaining, stage position, or even the round timer to figure out how the enemy likes to play in specific spots. Tournament level players are keeping track of these things and more all at the same time. KO. Alright, that concludes today's lesson on figuring out your opponents. Congratulations if you've been able to follow along all the way up until this point. But again, since everybody learns at their own pace, feel free to go back and re-watch either this week's lesson or a past lesson if you need to do some catching up. And there's going to be no homework this week, but before I go, I'd like to offer you guys a few final pieces of advice. First, stay focused. Players tend to reach a point where they plateau in skill because they don't stay motivated to improve. Whenever you play, you should be actively trying to work on some aspect of your game. If you're struggling with this, examine your gameplay and put your strengths and weaknesses into words. That'll make it easier to know what you need to work on. And remember, don't overwhelm yourself trying to learn too much at once. Take it one step at a time. Find other players who are similar in skill level so you can help each other get better. I don't think it really helps to play opponents who are a lot stronger than you. You won't be able to learn much since the opponent will be playing at a pace where you simply cannot keep up. It's easier to notice improvements in your game if you play against opponents who are similar in skill level. Once you're beating an opponent easily, that's the time to step up to a harder challenge. And finally, practice makes perfect. Consider practice mode as a gym for a fighter. Fighters spend a lot more time in the gym practicing than they do actually fighting. And for beginners, practice mode is the biggest key to improving. You should always be switching between playing actual matches and figuring out new things in practice mode. Do not overlook this very, very important training tool in Tekken. Alright guys, that's gonna wrap everything up. Congratulations on making it to the very end, and I want to officially welcome you to the Tekken community. From here, you can join an online Tekken Discord where you can link up with players from all over the world, or you can decide to hit up your local gaming spot and maybe make a few new friends. Don't forget, we've also got the Twitch stream coming up where I'll be talking about everything we covered in today's lesson. And don't forget to tweet out at me, at TK_Anakin, if you guys have any questions learning the game. I'm always happy to help new players. So with that said, I'm looking forward to seeing all you guys at the next tournament. Until then, peace.